I'd like to begin by introducing a few people. I'm Léo Gaumont, and I'm kind of the grand poobah of this here outfit. And I have Dr. Michael Wagner, who is my executive assistant. He just gave you a wave. I have Sharon Bavart, who is also working with us as one of our facilitators. So give them a wave there, Sharon, so they know who you are. I have Gary Weens, who does not have his video on. There he is. So give him a wave, Gary. Gary facilitates for us as well. And I too believe that that's all the names I recognize here. And for the rest of you, I welcome you all to the Education Unlimited weekly event. And I believe that this event today is called High School Accreditation and Post-Secondary Admissions. Is that right? Okay. I'm just going to send a message here while we're waiting. But if you are not familiar with us, we are at www.educationunlimited.ca. And there's another one that I should give you for those of you that really want to get into some serious stuff. As a matter of fact, this would be really very much in keeping with tonight's topic. And you can go to Léo Gaumont, that is me.com. And there you will find a lot of information as well. Well, I am going to start this evening with a very sad story. It's an experience that I had yesterday and today, and it just so happens that it actually nicely dovetails with our conversation this evening. And of course, I won't be using any names or anything like that, and I'll be kind of dodgy. And the story is kind of going to be funny because you're going to have to follow me down a few rabbit trails. I will get done with the story before the end of this little dialogue. But like I said, it's a sad story because the person I'm going to be alluding to this evening has been registered with us and working with us for a very, very long time. And I got a call yesterday and I spent a long time answering this lady's questions. Now, the lady phoned, and this is all about high school accreditation and post-secondary admissions, so it fits with tonight's little topic. But she called and probably never considered the fact that she was talking to a fellow who spent 25 years of his life teaching high school and providing opportunities for students to get accreditations towards the accumulation of these courses on a transcript and on and the earning of a diploma. So what do I know about accreditation? Then she also maybe didn't realize that she's talking to a fellow who spent a lot of years, especially in the 1990s, and accumulating mostly in the late 90s and early 2000s, going to visit, I think I'm not exaggerating by saying dozens, I could maybe even say hundreds of institutions across Canada, every single institution, post-secondary institution in Alberta, including dog grooming places, and the one that my favorite was the funeral director school. I went to every one of those places and I had just one question. And the question was, how does this institution accommodate unaccredited, non-transcript, non-diplomaed students? Now, the first thing I need to tell you is that I was very well received. I cannot think offhand of an institution that wasn't interested in hearing what I had to say. And what was interesting is that most of them had no idea what to do with such students. So they were asking me for my advice, exactly should be done, and what could be done to ascertain that these unaccredited home educated students were indeed I want to do a little screen sharing here, and as I talk and walk through a couple of things. I think I need to, okay, well, I'll go here for now. All right, and this is indeed our website. And what I'm going to do for a moment is go to our library. And for those of you who are interested in what I'm talking about tonight, you will see here some articles that were written. Some of these are a bit dated, but you'll see right here the summary of post-secondary admission practices. That particular article was written after years of experience talking to post-secondary institutions. What the lady didn't know is that, and for some reason, I don't know, maybe she did, but for many, many years, she's been registered with us, and maybe she neglected to go to the program resources where we have here post-secondary admissions. We are the only agency anywhere who's taken the time to do this. The provincial agency didn't do it, the national agency didn't do it, but we did. And this is the post-secondary admissions page. This is the page that we created to help people to recruit, encourage post-secondary students or home educated students to go to their college. So you'll see here that we have our home education administrative policy recommendations, and they can submit an application. Now you'll see here we've broken things up into two categories. First one I'm going to click on is the Alberta post-secondary institutions, and you can see that we've got institutions who have listed themselves from British Columbia and of course Manitoba, and we've got New Brunswick here, Newfoundland and Labrador, well, only one, Nova Scotia, only one again, Ontario, that's quite a few in Ontario, and then of course Saskatchewan. And you'll notice a little green check there, and the institution has been marked with an X, are endorsed by Education Unlimited as home education friendly. Now, institutions, you've got to remember that institutions are all businesses, and that businesses are in business to make money. And so there is hardly an institution out there that does not want your student. They all do. It's just that they want to make sure that the students are going to succeed, especially if you've got a prescribed program that is a program where all the courses are laid out for a year or 2 or 3 or 4. If the student flunks out of the first year, then that seat remains empty for the second, third, and fourth year. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So that's the reason why they're looking for the best possible students to fill those vacancies. Now that's a good thing, that really is, because we really don't want our students to be second rate. So the very simple summary of tonight's entire talk would be, if the post-secondary institutions are looking for the best, then it is our students' job to become one of the best. And that is not an impossible task. So I'm going to just go back and I'm going to click on Alberta post-secondary institutions. And here, because there's so many, and it is our home province, we've divided things up into apprenticeship, Bible college, community college, institutions of arts and technology, universities, and important post-secondary links. Let's just pick on a university for the time being. And you'll see that there's several of them. And there's some that have green checks and some that don't. Now, I'm just going to go to this one as an example, the MacEwan University. And you will notice what the post-secondary institution has written. It says that the MacEwan, just hold on here, I got to get stuff out of my own road. All right. MacEwan University inspires its students with a powerful combination of academic excellence and personal learning experiences. We provide a transformative education and a creative, collaborative, and supportive learning environment. This is not what we wrote. This is what they wrote. And as a matter of fact, they last updated it a couple of years ago. And our Dr. Michael Wagner, the fellow who waved at you, he actually reminds these post-secondary institutions every year to go here and update their information. So MacEwan has not to do that for a few years now. Now, you'll notice that this institution does not offer online program, is not actively recruiting home educated students, and is not endorsed by us. Now, if you want to know the endorsement criteria, you can click on that and see what it says. Now, notice what we've written here. This is very important because the post-secondary institutions can't get past the gate until they've read this. The directives that these post-secondary institutions are giving you regarding their admission policy, processes, and procedures are intended for students who lack Alberta programs of study accreditation, no credits, and serve only as guidelines when seeking or preparing for admission equivalent alternatives to Alberta 30 level requirements, and then specific admission requirements vary with programs. Let me translate so that you can understand. This is what the post-secondary institutions see. They see this as, we are not interested in you saying that our students need math 30 or English 30 or biology 30. Give us an alternative, okay? So then they then write, the university's policy requires all applicants meet individual program requirements. Okay, there's no special provision for home educated students at this time. Okay, they're being honest. Therefore, home educated applicants will be required to write Alberta education diploma examinations where necessary. Now, do you know why they don't have a check? That's it. Or were accepted by the institution, substitute post-secondary equivalents. Now, you can forget the first part. Look at the or. Where accepted by the institution, substitute post-secondary equivalents. Well, that's one of our tricks. For information, visit McEwen. I'm just going to take a moment to go to just one more so we can see maybe a friendly one. Let's look at the King's University. It actually has been working with us for quite some time. And as a matter of fact, it was very much a part of the initial survey that I did. Their registrar helped write the questionnaire that we used. You can see they updated in 2019, and it's a liberal arts college. It talks about all this stuff, and you can see that it does not offer online programming. It is indeed actively recruiting home educated students, and we endorse them. When we go through, they listed the different things that you can do in order to get in, okay? Now, I may repeat myself a little bit tonight because I am running on reserve, but you need to understand that prerequisites are prerequisites that cannot be negotiated away. That means that if you need English, you need English. If you need math, you need math. If you need biology, you need biology. Now, when they ask you for an English, math, or biology 30 level course, they're asking if you have proficiency to that level. So our argument is very simple. Are you looking for grade, for English 30, or are you looking for a sufficient level of English proficiency? Well, they'll always go B, okay? So this lady had no idea that she was talking to the fellow that had actually created all of this and has been maintained and advanced in the last few years by Dr. Michael Wagner. While I'm here, I'm just going to go one further. I'm going to give a bit more credit here to one of our attendees tonight, and that is Mr. Gary Weens, who is responsible for trying to simplify the Alberta apprenticeship instructions for ordinary people to understand. And you can see here, we have a great deal of things that you can read, tons and tons of links and so on. And anybody who is interested in doing an apprenticeship would be well advised to read all this, because we really shouldn't be involved in anything if we're really not prepared. And reading a little bit, spending an hour maybe to go through all this stuff would be well worth the time. So there's a trade entrance exam study guide. I want to highlight that. Something you really want to know. Please study the list of compulsory. And this is where you can get the modules at the Northwest Territories Education, Culture, and Employment website. So again, thank you to Mr. Gary Weens, who put this together. And again, all of this fits perfectly into this evening's topic of high school accreditation and post-secondary admissions. I told you I'd be off on rabbit trails. Back to my lady. What was the most amazing thing about this is that this lady's been with us long enough that her first child successfully completed his home education. And I'm not familiar, I can't remember if he started from scratch, but he certainly was with us for a long time. Did all of his high school level learning through us. And by the time he was 17, I think, he applied to 2 different institutions. One of them played, hard to get, and the other one said, sure, that's all there was to it. The one that said sure offered online program, and the mother was delighted that he had no problem getting into that post-secondary institution. And since it was an online program, it was bound to save her, if I remember right, she said something like $36,000 is what it was going to save them, because they weren't on campus. On-campus courses are very expensive in comparison to online ones, because there's no real cost to the online one. You create the program once and then deliver it 1,000 times. So she was really, really delighted. But then she made a mistake. It reminds me of a story you read at the very beginning of the Bible. It's in the Garden of Eden, where Eve took her advice from the devil himself. We said, hey, that's right. You don't have to worry. We'll take care of you. And so she phoned a post-secondary institution. And guess what she heard? She heard that they could not possibly get into that post-secondary institution without high school credits and diploma. Now, I spent an hour with the lady yesterday. I feel a little bit robbed, actually. One of the morals of the story is you might actually look into who's giving you the answers. Some people actually know what they're talking about. Some actually don't. And everybody thinks they're an expert. So you've got to be careful about where you get these things. So she got a little bit frustrated, and she decided to leave us, deregister, and go the accreditation route to get the high school diploma. Now, what is really strange about this story is that she clearly told me that this son that she is working with and concerned about is a hands-on kind of fellow. She repeated, I don't know how many times, that he doesn't like school. He doesn't like tests. He doesn't like books. And that he really just simply wants to work with his hands. Then she phones a post-secondary institution to ask them what it would take to get a zoology degree, how that has anything to do with working with hands. And he told her that she needed all the credits, and just decided to leave, decided to believe that individual. Never questioned why, never asked if they had alternate admission criteria for the home educated, never asked if they had ways of being able to ascertain proficiency, never even told them that the child was home educated, just simply asked. So here's another moral to the story. And the story is, when you phone any post-secondary institution, and let's just say in Alberta here, because it's a little closer to home, and you ask them, what are the requirements to get into the institution for this course and or that course? You should not be surprised if they answer in terms of accredited programs. English 30, math 30, biology 30, because most of the kids in this province go through the standard school programming, get those credits, and get the transcript and get the diploma. So that's one of the things you need to know, that if you tell them that the child has been home educated, usually they'll go, well, why didn't you say so in the first place? Go to the shelf and pull off the alternate admission criteria. Excuse me, I'll repeat that. The alternate admission criteria. Let me go back to my story about doing my cross-country survey of post-secondary institutions. Well, I guess that would be about 20 years ago. I hope you don't fall off your chair, but I did not find one single institution anywhere in this province or across Canada for that matter that insisted on a high school diploma. And I was not one bit surprised. Let me tell you why. Going back to my high school teaching years, my last good number of years, I was in a high school in Edmonton and teaching mostly grade 12 students, but I had a lot of foreign students, and I'm going to say particularly Asian students. There was a great influx actually of students from Vietnam at the time. And they would come along, and I was the advisor, if you will. So I was a homeroom teacher for these grade 12 students. I could not get those students to complete the requirements for a high school diploma. They were not at all interested in doing social studies unless it had something to do with where they were going. They certainly didn't care about phys ed or that calm course. They just sort of raised one eyebrow higher than the other, go, what for? And then it came to my attention that these students were actually smarter than I was. They were smarter than the school was too. What they had done is they had actually gone to the university, gone to the calendar, at the time they were all paper, of course, and found out what the requirements were to get into sciences or law or whatever the case may be. And there they would see that they needed the English 30, and let's say they're going into science, they needed the English 30 and biology 30 and or chemistry or physics 30. They would come and they would take all the English courses, get their credit in English 30, do the same for the sciences and the math, and then they were gone. Because they knew there wasn't an institution in this country that required a high school diploma. They just required the prerequisite programs. And they got those, and they were largely successful in getting in the institutions. So high school diploma, forget it. I think I could read these back. First. All right. I'm sorry, just muting here. But girls like to frame them and put them on the wall, and guys most often throw them in the bottom of their underwear drawer, never to see again, and nobody ever asks for it. When an employer asks a student, do you have a high school diploma? This is what he's really saying. Can you actually stick to doing something you actually don't like doing for 3 years? Do you have that stick-to-itiveness? That would be the question that they would be asking. Because if you did get a high school diploma, we know that you put in at least 3 years to get it, and that they probably weren't a great time at that. Most students would just as soon get out. Again, back to my high school days, I watched those students come in grade 10, and this is what they largely had on their minds. 3 more stinking years, and we're out of here. So what does the high school diploma really mean? Well, it's kind of a real trick where you can go and tell parents that they cannot be successful without a high school diploma. That is a lie perpetuated by the very system that can do nothing but benefit from the child's attendance from age 6 to 18. So that's the first thing we need to do, is get the diploma out of the road. Back to my story with the lady. She believed them when he said that they needed all the accredited courses and a high school diploma. All she would have had to have said is, no diploma, and they probably would have said, okay. However, there's a good possibility that she ran into the number one problem that we as home educated students run into. And that is, she actually assumed that the first person that she was talking to, actually had the power to say yes. Because your first answer on the phone is usually an assistant or a deputy assistant or the assistant to the deputy of the assistant of the admissions people. They know nothing about anything outside of the status quo 30s and transcript and diploma. They just don't even have the capacity. They've not experienced anything to do with that. So the first thing that she should have done, this mom, would simply say, may I speak to your superior, please? And then gone to the superior and said, I'm just, hedging my bets here. I'm just planning my child's education. Is there an alternative route to gaining admission to your institution? And most likely they would have said, yeah, there certainly is. There's a number of different ways. And as I pointed out in the screen share earlier, that article that I wrote is actually a summary of all the different things that are being used out there to measure the student proficiency in order to ascertain whether or not they'll be successful in the program. Well, I'd love to be able to tell you that I was successful in convincing this mother, but the powers of peer pressure are so great. The stories that go out there that really, truly try to put fear into the people's hearts that they cannot succeed without accreditation are incredible. And if you finally determine, okay, I'm going to take those chances, you have no lack of friends and neighbors and relatives and other people to discourage you from doing that. Because we, by and large, just bought the narrative that if you don't do it the government's way, you can't be successful. Well, I'm here to tell you that you most certainly can be and will be successful. I don't know how many students I've had in my years, but I'm not exaggerating when I'm telling you that I've probably been involved in the graduation of tens of thousands of students. I've been at this game for nearly 45 years, and I don't know of any home education crashes. I'm not saying that there hasn't been some slugging in and some having to do a little bit more or whatever, but it's always been far, far easier than 3 years of being seconded into a jail cell called high school. Usually it's a matter, oh, I didn't get that math. So being home educated students, they just quickly get that math, not that math or an equivalent. Better yet, here's what they often do. We often just send them to the post-secondary institutions that offer online program. So the next time that somebody says, do you have English 30? They can say, no, I don't really do, I didn't really do public programming, but I do have an English 255 course. Would that do? Well, obviously, if the prerequisite English 30 is to ascertain English proficiency, a first year university course most certainly proves that proficiency. Furthermore, that English 255 can be used as advanced credit. Now that means that you can take that course and you can apply it to your degree, or let's say you're going to NAEP, you could take that course and apply it towards probably the first year's English program and so on. So it's not a waste. These courses aren't cheap, but college is not very cheap either. Now here's the other thing about this lady and her story. She bought another big lie. And she bought the lie that if the children don't go to college, they can't be successful. I hate to say this, but there's an awful lot of American influence on that lie. In America, their school system is so bad, I can't say ours is any better, but in many places, the school system is so bad that what they have out there is a standard measuring tool called the SAT or the ACT, which are available to our students as well, and our Canadian students. And they have this great leveler, but the mindset is if the student didn't go to college, somehow they're losers. Excuse me. Well, you all know that nothing can be further from the truth. First of all, that comes from a false ideology where we look at importance in a hierarchical, sort of vertical thing where the PhD is so much better than the graduate student, better than the graduate student, better than the technical student, better than this and better than that, and better than a garbage collector. And finally, at the bottom of the pile, oftentimes, unfortunately, is mother. However, that's not the real world. Where would we be without our PhDs? They're learning things that we all benefit from. Where would we be without our technicians? Where would we be without our lawyers, doctors? Where would we be without our plumbers, electricians? Where would we be without our garbage collectors and our truck drivers? Seriously? Is there any one of those jobs that's more important than the other? I don't think so. I think they're all important. And I think each and every one of them deserve a whole lot more than what they get. So we don't see careers in a hierarchical, vertical series, but we see it through God's eyes, which is everything is important. Everybody has a part to play. And there's a very simple rule: to whom more is given is more expected. That's it. Now, I need to also tell you that, you know, this lady felt that her son could not be successful, even though she clearly demonstrated to me that he would never be successful in college, no matter what approach he took. People who hate books, hate school, hate pencils, hate reading, aren't bound to go to college. That's a simple duh. That doesn't make them a lesser. It clearly defines more or less where their careers are going to be. Now, you need to remember there's only two possible careers out there, and that is the right one, in keeping with the gifts and talents, abilities, interests that the person has, and the wrong one that is clearly disconnected from those things. Have you folks ever met a teacher that couldn't teach? Have you ever met a teacher that hated kids? I have. Have you ever met a lawyer that couldn't lawyer, or a doctor that was incompetent? You ever met bad drivers? I mean, there's all kinds of people out there. So I'm going to put an end to that story with the lady, and I'd love to be able to say it was a happy ending, but it's not. She decided to put that poor kids in school, and that is not going to be a pleasant experience for them. And I'm going to go on to another story. Many years ago, when I was doing that post-secondary trip across Canada, where I was visiting all the institutions, a couple of years later, I was invited to speak at the Newfoundland Home Education Conference. And I had, right after lunch, a session on careers. Now, I really don't like doing career sessions because I sound rather schizophrenic. I say, hey, don't worry about it. You know, God's got it all under control. And with the next breath, I say, get off the couch and do something. And they all think I'm being, I'm confused in my statements, but that's not true. So what happens is that it was right after lunch. And you know how that is. You always just have that big lunch and you're full. You already don't feel like talking. And so I get up there and there's a whole bunch of students down there and they're all eager beavers. They've got their pencil and their paper and they're waiting for this guru to give them a step-by-step magic formula as to what they're going to do in their lives. And I have to admit that momentarily I lost my nerve. Now, you got to remember that I make my living standing in front of just those type of people, young, 14 to 18-year-olds who are getting ready for life. So the fact that I lost my nerve means there was something a whole lot more than the students, and that is they were looking to me as though I was God or something, and I can guarantee you that that's not the case. So, I'm not sure if you folks do this, but every once in a while, we're all kind of backed into a corner where we have an emergency one-word prayer, where we look up in the sky and we go, help. And I did that. So I had my help prayer, and I got a really good idea very quickly. Now, there was about 200 people or so in the auditorium that day. And I asked them, how many of you folks have some kind of post-secondary training? Anything after, let's say, grade 12, a diploma, a degree, a certificate, something of the sort. Well, you shouldn't be surprised if I told you that 80% of the crowd put their hand up. I said, leave it up, please. I have another question. I said, leave your hand up if you are working in your field of training. Folks, it was, it was scary what I saw. Most likely 80% of the people put their hands down. I was stunned. I really was. I shouldn't have been. I wouldn't be today, but I was then. So 15 years ago or so. So then I asked one more question. How many of you are happy at what you're doing today? And almost all the hands went up. So then I asked one more question, which is, how many of you knew what you would be doing in life when you were 15 years old? And only a few hands stood up. Now, I did watch those hands. And the ones that were up because they were post-secondary trained stayed up because they were working in the field and they loved it and knew they were going to do it when they were 15, fell into one category. Well, you might think it's actually two or three, but it's actually one. They were tradesmen, they were farmers, or they were fishermen. Now, there's one thing that all three of those careers have in common, and that is that you, in every one of them, you apprentice or learn from a mentor. And so that was really good to know. And back to my story with the lady, I mean, what she should have been doing is grooming that young man for the trades. He had done very well there. Now she's just put in 3 years of wasted time. I doubt he'll put in 3 years. What's going to happen is that he's going to go for a year, quit, and then end up with nothing. Whereas if he would have stayed with us, we would have helped him with his apprenticeship training. And by the time he was 16 years old, and we do this often, that student would have been off to an apprenticeship and working towards his journeyman certificate, which he probably would have earned around the time a lot of his colleagues would have been graduating. So that's the story. So get back to Newfoundland. What did we learn? A, how many people have post-secondary training? Translate. How many of you believe the nonsense that you could never be anything unless you went to college or went to university and got some kind of a degree? A lot of people believed it. Second question, did it work? For most people, it didn't. And the third question is, how about that? You still ended up finding your place in spite of the fact that you probably spent $60,000 to get a piece of paper you're not even using today. Moral of the story, everybody is bound for post-secondary. Not everybody is bound for college. Let me explain that. The pre-puberty years, we call the primary years. The post-puberty years, we call the secondary years. The primary years, you learn the fundamentals, the basic skills. In the secondary level, you learn to apply those skills. And at the post-secondary level, you specialize in those skills. Sometimes it involves college. Oftentimes it doesn't. And we most certainly do not want to be measuring our students by whether or not they have a college degree or a diploma or a certificate. When I ask parents what their deepest hope for their children is, almost always it boils down to what everybody has in mind, and that is we want our children to be happy. They will never be happy if they're trying to be something that they are not. If they were not created for that purpose or that career, they will not be happy. That's how come you get teachers that hate kids and doctors that will, that can just as soon kill you, and so on. These are people who actually bought into the whole idea that they needed post-secondary training in order to be able to be successful. You are successful when you are working in a field that is in keeping with the gifts, talents, abilities, and interests that you have. That's the kind of job where you can hardly wait for the days off to come to an end because you are anxiously looking forward to going to work. Does that happen? Yes, it does, if you're in the right place. All right. Well, I think I occupied my little spiel time. And what I'm going to do at this point in time is I'm going to invite you to ask specific questions. While you're thinking about that, I'm going to ask Crystal to put her camera on and wave to us, as Crystal has joined us. And she also is a member of Education Unlimited as a facilitator. And she might be away from now. She's probably just listening to me. Anyway, you'll see there a name called Crystal Terhorst. There she is. Crystal waves to us. I just wanted to introduce her as well as one of our most wonderful facilitators. All right. Now, you can answer your question or ask your questions one of two ways. If you're not familiar with how Zoom works, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat thing there, and you can click on the chat thing and you can ask the question to everyone, or I think it also can be addressed to any particular individual, excuse me, on this list. So most likely the best thing is just to fire a question out to everyone, and then we'll be reading them, and I will be answering, and I will be tapping in on some of the other people here to answer as well. And if you are not bashful and you don't mind talking on your, or talking to us, you can unmute yourself and simply ask the question. So while we're waiting for people to think about this and put things down, I'm going to ask some of the other people that work with us to put in a word or two. My goodness, nobody wants to talk and there are no questions. Gary, you've got anything to add to what I said?
I maybe can just add in regards to the sense of our personal experience with our 4 girls in regards to the high school, in the sense that none of them went through a college program in regards to what they were doing. Their dreams and aspirations were more along the lines of family and having family in regards to pursuing those kind of things. And so they pursued the things that would help them to do that. And they stayed away from the debt that was incurred through college in regards to those kinds of things, but they also continued on with their studies. And so our oldest one was into music, and so she continued on with her violin and her voice and her piano. And then she taught music lessons for a number of years before she was married. Our second one continued on, and she was very much into photography. And so she set up her own studio and did portrait photography. She specialized in kind of the early years in terms of family photography, in terms of what she was doing with that. And she talked with a number of people who were actually in a university class in regards to what they were doing. And one of them was in her second year in regards to her photography and still hadn't set up a lighting kit in regards to what that was. And my daughter just looked and said, "What? That's one of the most important things." And I mean, she had bought a lighting kit right off the bat, learned how to use it. There were lots of online resources that she was able to tap in, of professionals that actually mentored people through some online programs and that kind of a thing. And so there are many ways that you can approach that post-secondary part of life in regards to what they are. And they certainly don't all need to be through a college or a university program.
I'm going to ask Mike to make a few words there. Mike has been following me. He's a very, very long friend. We've been friends for forever. And he was there during those years when I was doing all this research, and very much an encouragement to me, and I appreciate him very much for that. He's the one that's actually eventually came working for us, and he's the one responsible for the post-secondary links that we have there on our website. So Mike, you want to put in a word or two regarding that?
The main thing I would say is one of the parts of the website you pointed to early on, it was under the parent support. There's a library there, and you went to the post-secondary section of the library. And I just wanted to point out that I think the most important document there for parents is one called Addressing Home Educating Parents Post-Secondary Concerns. It's, I don't know, about 6 pages long, but it's kind of a summary of everything you've learned about post-secondary admissions for unaccredited home educated students. Like it's the perfect introductory document for parents to read. Any parent, regardless of where they're at in their home educating program, they should really read that document. They can have a comprehensive understanding of the post-secondary issue from a home educator's perspective. And from there, you know, they can really start to think about what's best for their children or their child that they're dealing with for their future. So I just wanted to really highlight that particular document called Addressing Home Educating Parents Post-Secondary Concerns as the very best document to go to as for someone who's just beginning to look into this issue. And you know, you've got the document there in PDF. You can read it over however many times you want, and you might go back to it and consult it later, you know, as you experience different things and look at different things, but it gives so many different options. And I think that's a really, really important document for parents to look at.
Yeah, and it was written by a guy who knows what he's talking about, I think, right, Mike?
Yeah, it was written by you. Well, I mean, that was one of the first things we did when I worked for you, is I wanted you to put together something that was kind of like a summary of all the knowledge that you had on this, like the most important points that parents needed to know from the outset. Because you know, they can't really look into this issue without knowing the basic ideas of what you've learned and what you know. When you start with that, there's so much you can learn after that, but you can't really do anything until you know those basic fundamentals that are explained in that document.
Thank you, Mike. I think that's really important. I'm not sure if Sharon has anything to add. You can add if you'd like. If not, you can shake your. I'll put you on. I'll find you and I'll put you on. Hold on. I'll unmute you. Sharon, you're just getting used to a new machine here. Uh-oh. I can only ask you to unmute. Ha! So you're gonna have to figure out your own unmute system. I can shut you off. I just can't.
I think I did it.
Ah, she did. There you go. Sharon, you want to share a few words with us regarding your post-secondary experience?
Yes, thank you. I would like to highlight the transcript that you have created.
Ooh, yeah.
We use that in our own family, and not all of our children went on to college, but those who did use that transcript, and colleges were favorable to it, not only Canadian, but also American. So
Thank you. Yeah.
I find that transcript a beautiful thing about Education Unlimited.
Okay, I should address that. Thank you. I forgot all about it. You know, it's one thing to say we're not going to do it one way, and you know, like I refer to that as a particular political party that could do nothing but complain about what everybody else is doing. But when you wait for them to offer an alternative, it's never coming. So I don't vote for that party. So it's one thing to say you don't need accreditation and high school transcript. There's two things regarding transcript I want to make here. Number one, if you don't get the full complement of courses towards a high school diploma, you risk being dubbed as a failure or as a dropout. That's important to understand. So post-secondary home educating providing institutions that offer the credits oftentimes do not have your best interest at mind. You got to remember the one thing about the credit route that's very important to understand, and that is credits pay 4 times more than the route that we suggest. So in other words, if I'm a good businessman, it would be in my best interest to frustrate your home education program or your unschooling program into believing that you can't succeed without the credit, because I can do nothing but make money at that. Bear that in mind if you are talking to home education providers. I guarantee you, the lady that I talked to today, she already told me that she had talked to an agency that said, oh, sure, no problem, we can help you with that. I happen to know that that agency is extremely fraudulent, and they have actually messed around with a lot of students. Their bottom line is far more important than the welfare of the students. So be careful here. Don't get sucked in. So when it comes to credit, it's all or none. Now, I'm advocating none. And what we do is that for those of you who are registered with us, you already know this. And for those who aren't, you should. Everything we do is digital. So everything that you've done, and you're doing it yourself, you're recording your own thing. When the child turns 13, we spawn an online cumulative credit transcript. And what you do is you just simply add the things as they progress. At the end of the home education journey, could be 15. Actually, last year, we had to wait for a 12-year-old to turn 13 because he was ready to go to college, but he wasn't old enough for the transcript. Seriously, okay? So as soon as he turned 13, he filled out the transcript and, you know, everything went well. So yes, you could get to college much, much, much quicker if you don't play school. And that's certainly what we do. However, you're not going to get to college at any age if you don't have the appropriate prerequisites or proof of proficiencies in certain subject. That's where the cumulative transcript comes in. So you just continue to write things in as the child progresses, and when you get to the end, you submit it. It goes to the facilitator. Facilitator takes a quick review. We always kind of want to avoid spelling errors and stuff like that on the transcript. And then it's approved. It's a PDF that's put in the child's file. You get a copy of it. Then when you apply to a post-secondary institution, and Sharon, this is something that's happened since your day, the post-secondary institutions don't usually like to accept a PDF or a transcript from a student because they know full well that today's student are savvy enough to be able to go in there and change that 68 to a 92. So they want to get it directly from us. So the post-secondary institution or the student asks the post-secondary institutions who provides us with an email. We send the post-secondary institution with a secure link that is good for, I think, 48 hours. And then they click on that button. We provide them with the password. They go to the password and they download that transcript, the real McCoy, right from our secured site to their computer. And they love it. So we've been very successful using that, getting into post-secondary institutions, colleges, you know, technical schools and so on. Those people who are headed to the workforce, they don't really need it, but we always encourage all of our students to do what they can. Now, that leads to a question that one person asked. And I've got a few here. I'm going to skip a little bit. Okay. Can't see it anymore. And of course, that is everyone has to do the maximum they can in any field. We have a very simple rule in our home education program that, well, let me put it this way. My 17-year-old granddaughter is, you know, just wrapping up now. It was very simple. If you can, you should. So in other words, if God didn't put math in those children, folks, you can sing and dance on the table. You're not going to put math in those children. You have to work with them. You can't create something of them. If music isn't part of their life, don't make them do it. They'll prove that they're intelligent, and then as soon as they get a chance, they'll quit. Work with them. Work with the gifts and talents, abilities that they do have. So if they can do math, they should do math. If they're really good at writing, they should write. And because maybe, I think it's a fair guess to say that their future will probably include those types of skills, because that's what they are good at. Now, there is one question here you can probably all see. What's a good game plan if your child doesn't seem to have a direction yet? He's only 13. Well, let me give you this advice if he's 13. There's two subjects that you probably are going to have to allow this child, especially if it's a boy, to do. And that first subject is eating, and the second subject is sleeping. That's about the best they can do when they're about 13. If it's a girl, she's starting to mature and she's starting to concern herself a little bit about the future. If it's a boy, he couldn't care less. The future to him might be tomorrow. And it's usually, what are we having for lunch tomorrow? So that's the nature of a 13-year-old boy. Now, what happens to those guys is they start coming along and all of a sudden they turn 15 or 16 and everything changes. I've seen a student, and I'm not exaggerating here, at 16 years of age, decided he was going to leave home, and mom said, no, not until you finish a grade 12 level programming. And this lady was more of a homeschooler than an uneducator. or an unschooler. And what she did is she insisted that all of her children get to a grade 12 level in the ABECA program in the 5 subject streams. Now, that's pretty demanding, I have to say. And she was successful. I think for the most part, all of her children did get there. This young man was a couch potato. He fell asleep when he was 13, and he woke up again when he was about 16 and a half. And when he woke up, he thought, oh, I got to get moving. Now, he was about halfway through his 6th level at the time. And that's when I was on the phone. I got there in the spring. He was 17, and the mom said, yeah, he's got he's got a couple of subjects left in grade 11, then he's got a grade 12. So I shook my head and go, okay, I must have missed him or something in the fall, because I had him in about 6.5, 7. And she said, oh no, let me tell you the story. So this student got up, woke up from his, pubescent slumber, and did 6 levels, 5 subjects in about a year and a half. So the idea that it takes 12 years to do a basic education is a complete fallacy. Matter of fact, it takes about 100 hours to do the primary, and you could probably do everything from grade 12 to first year university in about 3 years. So that's how much time it actually takes. So there's another question. I have 2 teens who have been part of the mainstream school up until now. I'm wondering if anyone has made the transition from regular stream school to an uneducation, I would assume, unschooling approach model as teens. And the answer is yes, but I think in fairness, I do have to say that the longer that your children have been in school, the more damage, I guess, there is, the more attitudes there are, the more bad habits there are. I know that I should have been wiser than this. I know that Mike, Dr. Mike Wagner there, he was on my back or talked to me about home education for quite a while before I determined to do so. And my oldest child was just going into grade 7 at the time. And to this day, we're still having to deal with, she's the mother of the grandchildren I was mentioning who are now all in their teens and doing very well. But to this day, she's still having to come in and get deprogrammed from school. You need to understand that school is a paradigm created by man for man's world. And what we're advocating is an unschooling approach where we allow God to be the director. And that's not just for man's world, but for eternity as well. So it's a much better bet. And furthermore, you have to understand, and I don't know whether you share the faith or not, but those children were created by God, not by that system. So until I see schools or governments or churches give birth to children, I put my money on parents. It's going to be far better. Yesterday, when I was talking to the lady, I said, here's the difference. You as the mother are teaching, I'll make up a name, George Samuel Jones. You know him, you know his age. You've changed his diapers. You've taught him how to speak. You're teaching him right from wrong and everything else. Okay? Let's pit that against the school that sees him as number 387448-2. There's the difference. So when we train our children at home, we give them the biggest gift that we can give our children ever. We allow them to be comfortable in their own skin. We allow them to be okay with their weaknesses. We allow them to soar with their strengths, and they find their place. There's one other thing I have to mention about the post-secondary of all of your children. I hope you're all sitting down because this is going to shock you. Your child's future is, and career options, I guess you could say, is quite frankly, none of your business. You're not the one that's going to have to live with those choices. They will. And they're the ones who know themselves better. Here's the difference between those who have been to school and those who haven't. Those who have been to school are the ones back into that Newfoundland session. They're the ones that believed it all. They eventually found their place, but they had to go to college to find out they didn't like this, or go to an institution of other kind to find out they didn't like that, and go work in something and find out that they hated it and so on. But eventually they found their place. They eventually became comfortable with themselves and what they were able to do and what they liked doing. Our children have that from the get-go. They're far better equipped for the post-secondary world than anybody who's gone through an institution or an institutional school. I hope that helps. And yes, the transition is quite simple. You, first of all, allow them to, I'm sitting over here, allow them to just decompress, just get away from school for a while. Now we have an advantage in that the government insisted that we all practice home education starting last March, I think it was. And so a lot of them have decompressed. And now what you want to do is you want to just simply get to know your children a little better and find out what really truly interests them and allow them to do that. Don't play school. Don't have all the subjects, and don't start at 9 and go to 3 and, you know, 15 minutes off for recess and an hour off for lunch and that kind of thing. Just be a family. Just enjoy learning together. All right. And somebody says something about hating math. Oh yeah, here we go. Would you recommend a consumer math for a child who hates math? Now, there's a lot of really, really good consumer math programs. The very, very best math program, consumer math program, is called Everyday Life. It happens in the shop, it happens in the kitchen, and when you're doing all of your own book work and accounting and stuff like that, bring them with you. Teach them that, you know, to go to the store to figure out what's the better buy. Show them how to work with mortgages and so on and so forth. And if you're not quite clear about that, well, learn along with them and you'll have a really good time learning things that are really important. But a good math program, boy, I'd almost have, I'm just drawing a blank. I think pretty well every curriculum supplier will have it. But on that note, I'm just going to quickly take you back here to a screen share for a moment. And I'm going to, where am I? Here we go. I'm going to take us here. And I'm going to go back. And I'm going to go to resources here and program listings. And what you would do is you're looking for mathematics. You're looking for either a vendor, a website, an iOS, or an other at the secondary level. Let's say you're talking consumer. And maybe you're just looking for something that's really easy, a unit study or an online course or anything like that, or computer-based learning. When you click on that, you will find that we have reduced your options to this. Otherwise, if you don't use your filters, your options look something like this. So you can see what we've done here again to help the home educating world is we've listed, oh, I'm not sure how many different resources we have there. And then we've installed filters to help you find exactly what you want. So that would be my first recommendation. And then after that, don't be afraid to tap into the expertise of the facilitator that you will have assigned. Okay. Thanks for the compliment. Okay, some of the choices for math. Oh, here we go. Would include foundation and personal. Oh, yes, of course. Thank you for Dave Ramsey. Anything Dave Ramsey's good stuff. Record keeping for Rod and staff. There's tons of record keeping courses. I know CLE is a really good one. You can see there's some other suggestions. There we go. Our facilitators are at work already, showing options that you can have. So, all right, well, I think we've exhausted our hour, and that's coming from an exhausted fellow who's been in meetings, believe it or not, all day long. So I am happy to say that I'm tired. I think I'll go home now. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I hope you've been blessed by tonight's off-the-cuff discussion on whether or not you need high school accreditation. If you didn't get the message, the answer is no. And whether you need a diploma, once again, if you missed that message, it is no. And are they required for post-secondary admissions? And the answer is No, however, not everybody needs post-secondary admission. So again, thank you, one and all. This has been recorded, and it will be going on YouTube once my two fellows, Mike and Gary, get at it. Mike is going to do a bunch of stuff. He sends it to Gary. Gary, I don't know what it is. Between the two of them, they'll let me know when it's online. Mike, do you want to tell them where to go if they want to see this thing to review it again?
Yeah, there's Education Unlimited has a YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, it's easiest. I just searched Léo Gaumont when I want to find something from Education Unlimited on YouTube. So just search Leo's name on YouTube and a whole bunch of stuff will come up. But most importantly, the Education Unlimited channel will come up. And from there, you can find any of our videos. And because we just recorded this one, it'll go up in a few days. It'll be one of the first videos in the line there once you click on the videos of our channel.
Okay, thank you, and thank you everyone. A special thank you for all the members of the Education Unlimited team that joined us, and thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. And good night, and God bless you.